My dear brothers and sisters, this Holy Wednesday, often called Spy Wednesday, we hear in this Gospel from Matthew the story of Judas looking or spying out a time to hand over Jesus to the Pharisees and to the Sadducees. When we look at the figure of Judas, we see one of Jesus' intimate companions, one who Jesus had given, just like the other apostles, authority over unclean spirits. He healed the sick, raised the dead, drove out demons, just like the rest. So that when Jesus says to his apostles, one of you will betray me, they don't think about, who didn't raise the dead or heal the sick? Right? You don't hear them say that. They would have known immediately, oh, well, this guy. So we see something going on where even if Jesus gives somebody a position and a particular authority, doesn't mean that that person is going to always be faithful. These words, one of you will betray me, echo in our hearts because we know that we all do. We all betray the Lord in one way or another. This is exactly what's at stake. When we turn away in sin and want to focus on our own human understanding, either in disbelief of God's interventions, or when we seek out things that are more convenient, or where we think, this isn't so bad, then we end up betraying the Lord. Yet Judas presents to us a fundamental difference, because St. Peter, we see, was willing so he thought, to go to death with the Lord, willing to face imprisonment, so he thought, but then he ends up and denies Jesus 3 times. And yet St. Peter experiences something that Judas doesn't, and that's repentance. But not just a sadness over having committed the sin, but a repentance that looks to the Lord himself to be able to be the one to restore things. Whereas Judas, we see something different. We see a man who, after coming to repent, that is after experiencing sadness for his sin, he looks to fix it himself. So he goes out and he hangs himself. It's this utter reliance upon oneself. So that's what we see as Judas's big failure. And it's a warning to all of us. There are times when we're relying on ourselves only. Whether it's in our attitude of thinking that we alone, in our own human efforts, are going to completely and totally transform our society and take care of the poor. The big question, of course, of the day is, why waste money on rebuilding a cathedral when all that money can be used for the poor? Well, we've heard that before. This isn't anything new. And no one would ever tell any other religious organization not to rebuild. It's just that simple. It's that simple. Jesus doesn't say to ignore the poor, obviously. That would also be sin. But the issue at stake is this. We are not to fix things on our own strength as if money in and of itself would fix all problems, because then we fall into the trap of Judas. They said that he was in charge of the money and he would steal the contributions sometimes, because the idea was money gives power. And so the temptation there is that, a reliance on self, a reliance upon human means only. The same thing can be said of anybody who thinks that the way that things are going to be changed is simply by a strict adherence to what people have been used to again and again, in terms of some folks who want to take things back, say, and have the priest turn his back and go back to Latin. But if it's done with the wrong heart, of a reliance upon oneself and what mankind does alone, then it is not going to change our society either. It's not going to change the way in which Catholics are. In fact, what it could do, not only just Catholics, but our entire society, what it could do is it could become a rigidity that ends up stopping Catholicism from influencing the rest of society. Jesus calls us to be salt and light. Light doesn't know what it's doing. It just, by its own being, it causes a place to brighten up. Salt doesn't think about what it's actually doing. It doesn't try hard to be a preservative. It just is. So we too enter into this great mystery of relying upon Jesus. This great mystery of recognizing that there is more that he can give to us, that there is more that he can do for us than we ask or imagine. So I was thinking about this issue with Judas and this refusal to rely upon the Lord. I couldn't help but think about the many mystics that Sister Regina likes to read about, who complain who hear the complaints of Jesus, him sharing the burden of his heart of how people do not come to him to receive. They do not receive everything he wants to give. And so, therefore, continue to basically take him for granted in one way, but in another way, ignore him. So we want not relying upon ourselves, but relying upon the Lord to reveal to us the fullness of what it is that he has given to us. It's not a matter of necessarily changing what we do here. It's not a matter of making Mass something other than what it is. It is what it is, right? It is this Eucharistic sacrifice. It is a linking of heaven and earth. It is representing, that is, making present once again the sacrifice of Jesus on Calvary, which is only possible by linking this celebration to the divine worship in heaven of the risen Lamb as well. So you have the risen one and the slain Lamb together in the Eucharist. Here we have this. Again, it's not changing what that is. But maybe it is asking the Lord to release all of his love, all of his grace, all of his mercy, and all of his power to save us. Not only power to save us, but power to save the entire world. Because truly, this is what we see. This is what we see. It is not our own human efforts alone. We can't do it alone. Just like if we wanted to rebuild the church by ourselves. Can't happen. But it is God. God who is at work. God who brings light out of darkness. God who brings life out of situations of death and destruction. It's very interesting to see even just what's happening in France with Notre Dame Cathedral, how the image of the cross is giving a lot of people hope, and how there is that theme of resurrection. So today we ask specifically for that grace, not to be in stubborn self-reliance as Judas was, but instead to open up completely to the Lord in faith.